Hello and good morning, and welcome to the intermediate lesson today. I am just going to share this lesson online. So let's see. YouTube. And we've got one person already. Good morning. Welcome to the lesson. I'm just going to share this lesson online so more people can join. Share WhatsApp and share. Okay. Well, good morning. I hope you are well. In this edition, in this lesson, we are going to take a look at room to rent. Now, in room to rent, this is part of Unit 9 over here. We've got, this follows on from Home Sweet Home, which we looked at the other day. And over here, we're moving on to the next book. Now we've got two. We looked at present perfect and present perfect continuous the other day as well. So we're now going to look on page 84. Page 84 of intermediate outcomes. We are going to look at room to rent. And what we're going to look at here, again, we're going to look at some word building, phrases that we can use, certain types of question tags as well. And this then takes us later on to see how we can further describe the accommodation that we are living in as well. So let's have a little look. First of all, room to rent. Now, some of you watching are currently renting a room as we speak. Now, you can rent property, you can rent a house, you can rent a flat, you can rent a room, you can rent an apartment. Now, obviously, rent is not when you buy the place, but you pay to live in the place. In terms of places that I myself have rented, I've rented quite a few places in the UK, especially when I was at university. I enjoyed renting when I lived in Florence. I lived in Florence for a while. That was interesting and fun. And yes, I think a while as well when I was in Australia, New Zealand. So I've rented in a few places, and one of the things that always comes up is obviously what type of room you are renting, and the location as well. Off top of that, there's also other things to think about when you are living with people. I know one of the most difficult things I have found in my experience when renting rooms or shared apartments with people is how clean a place is, especially the bathrooms and the kitchen. I remember at university, the kitchen was a particular problem. The kitchen would often be in a mess, an unclean state. Same with the bathrooms. Actually, come to think of it, I think one of the biggest problems I found with renting a room or renting an apartment is to do with certain basics like toiletries, soap. In the end, I remember it was probably just better to buy your own toilet roll, for example, instead of doing a collective share. Same with food as well. I remember the fridge it would be a problem. Who because often you might have a fridge that is just about big enough, and each of you takes a little bit of the fridge. But and again, a common problem is how clean the fridge was and whether people were going to take your food or whether they were going to stick to just taking their own food. So there's lots of issues that come into play when we are renting. Now, when we're looking at this, we've got some photos at the top. And all of these photos are to do with a particular city, namely Berlin. So let me know in the live chat section if you have been to Berlin, and let me know what you think of Berlin in the comment section. What we have underneath is you have some advertisements or adverts about different apartments. So I'm just going to go through some of these adverts. We're going to look at some of the language that they use. So if we look at the first one, so just to remind you, we're on page 84, and we're looking at question 2. Question 2. At the top over here, you have close to urban underground station. Urban. Now, urban, 8 kilometers from the city center, near the airport, Lake Tegel. I'm not very good with my German words, and woodlands. Huge and beautiful decorated house. This is very friendly family offers. Half board, 260 euros for or self-catering, 190 euros accommodation. So if you're talking about an urban, urban area, you're not central, you're far away. You're in a residential area, so a part of the city that is specifically for living. It's not a place it's not a center, it's not a town center or anything like that. So you then underneath you have a different advert. You've got this cheerful household consists of a young couple, 2-year-old boy and baby. Breakfast and evening meal included. Lovely spacious room in a flat in smart residential area near Tiergarten Park and Embassies. 290 euros is the price. Now, one of the things that I would like to point out here is the description. Sometimes we can go for, let's say, very factual description, and sometimes you can go for something a little bit more colorful, trying to describe the character of play description. You would simply talk about the location, what your apartment is close to, how long it takes to get into the center, and the very basics, such as shared bathroom, single room, shared kitchen, that sort of thing. As soon as we start using language such as a cheerful household, which means a happy household, spacious, it gives us a colorful description of what the feeling of a place is. Between the two, I think it depends what you're looking for, short term or long term. If it's short term, you might want just to see the more factual sides of description. While if you're going to be there for a while, seeing a more colorful description is probably better. Let's look at the next one, bright apartment. Now, if you remember the other day, the word bright, if it's something bright, it means there's a lot of natural light in the accommodation. So here we have bright apartment in the up and coming area of I can't even say the name. I'm not going to try and say this name. Whatever the name is, this area. Self-catering rooms, for two single students sharing with a friendly lady owner. Relaxed atmosphere within walking distance of a lively nightlife. I actually like this description a lot, and this would automatically be one of my preferred choices if I saw this. I like the idea of an apartment being bright, a lot of natural light. So if there's natural light, it will automatically feel more spacious anyway. Self-catering rooms. This is good. If something is self-catering, it means you can look after yourself. You don't have to rely on other people. An up and coming area. This means the area is being developed. A lot of investment is going in the area. A lot of new businesses opening up. It could very well be the sort of place ideal if you are young and single, for example, or let's say you're not you don't have family commitments. Let's put it that way. So you could have a lot of time to go out and socialize and meet new people as well. Um, Self-catering rooms for two single students sharing with a friendly lady owner. Okay, so this tells us that this property, this apartment, is ideal, perfect actually, if you are a student, and the person who will the owner is also a friendly lady, which is nice to know. A relaxed atmosphere within walking distance of lively nightlife. This is important. Again, it tells you that you can be relaxed. It's not a stressful environment. And more importantly, you've got walking distance to various important locations that would be ideal if you're a student, such as nightlife. And that is for 180 euros. So that's pretty good. It doesn't say actually in any of these if this is 180 euros a week or 180 euros a month. I am guessing this is 180 euros a month, which is not that lot if it is 180 euros, but it is student accommodation. Um, oh, I'm not sure actually. Maybe it is for a week. It'd be a bit strange if it's just for a week, though. It's worth pointing out. Maybe I've missed something. Anyway, next one. Beautiful country house in village. 30. It should be in a village, not in village. In a village. 35 kilometers from Berlin. Well, that's quite far away. Very green, young and friendly homeowner, internet access. But this is important. 15 minutes to train station. And 170 euros a week or a month. This must be a week. This must be a week. 170 euros a week. 170 euros a week with breakfast. Well, it's only 15 minutes away by to the train station, which is obviously quite important. And then 35 kilometers to Berlin via the train sounds decent. Next one, a compact room with access to own kitchen facilities, large old house owned by a retired couple offering quiet, comfortable accommodation, very central. Okay, so what do we have here? Compact. If you remember from the other day, compact is when there's not a lot of room. So this is not spacious. You have your own kitchen facility. Now, I'm not sure about this. It says room is already compact and you have a kitchen. I'm not so sure. Large old house owned by a retired couple offering quiet, comfortable accommodation. Quiet, comfortable accommodation, and it is very central. I don't know if this is necessarily the best type of room to rent if you are a young, sociable person. But on the other hand, if you are traveling alone and you are not looking to have a lot of you're not looking to do a lot of socializing, or not too much socializing in your immediate area, then this might still be a decent option. Finally, we have a good sized room. Good sized room, this means it's not going to be too big, nor should it be too small. In Again, they're missing out the article here. I suppose they're trying to. It should be not in lovely big. It should be in a lovely big apartment. A 45-minute bus ride from the center. A 45-minute bus ride from the center. I'm not sure if that's a good thing or a bad thing. A very pleasant family of 4 children, age 16 and 20. The flat is beautifully decorated, half board, very good cuisine, 2 dogs, non-smoking girls only. Oh, right. So this is really quite specific. Uh, you've got a half board here, so it's not full boarding, it's half board. I think by this they're probably meaning that you have to look after yourself in some way. Non-smoking girls only. Okay, so this is if you're a guy, no. If you're a boy, no, this is not ideal for you. Well, you're not allowed. And €200, quite expensive. I'm not so sure about that one. For me, I think the bright apartment is probably the best one over here. So then if we work down, we would have question number 4, vocabulary, describing areas. What we would have to do is complete the descriptions of areas in a city with these words. You've got rough, isolated, connected, smart, dead, multicultural, filthy, and lively. Just to give you an idea, we'll go through each one together and we'll look at even more examples. Now, because there are we've got these new words, what we will also look at is how we can develop our use of these words and maybe look at either synonyms or antonyms, which are the opposite as well. So let's look at the first one. There are a lot of bars and restaurants than there used to be. There are a lot more bars and restaurants than there used to be. So it's quite at night now. Quite rough? No. Quite isolated? No. Well, the answer here is quite lively at night now. So lively, what do we mean by lively? Well, if something is lively, we are saying that the place feels busy, energetic. And the place is also energetic. There we go, energetic. And you could actually also use other than lively, I suppose you could also say affluent as well. Affluent. They all mean really in this case lively, busy, something whereby if you go out you will feel the energy of a place. So it's talking about the atmosphere. The opposite to lively, so the antonym would be dead. And we have the opposite here already somewhere. So there's either lively or something that is just dead. Number 1 is lively. 2, we've got there's a lot of crime and quite a few social problems. So it's a bit dead, no. Isolated, no. Rough. It's a bit rough. Now, rough has lots of different meanings, but in this case, if something is a bit rough, you're saying that it's not a very safe area. You have to be careful. So obviously, if a place is rough, the antonym would be safe. So rough and safe. So you've got rough, which is negative, and safe, which is positive. I'll write that again. Rough, which is negative, and you've got safe, which is positive. Um, if you want a synonym of rough, what we can use is, now this is very much UK English, not so much American, but a synonym of rough is the word dodgy. Dodgy. If something is dodgy, it means it's you can't trust. So it's not a 100% accurate in terms of a synonym, but it's related. So if something is dodgy, it means, or someone is dodgy, or if it's a dodgy area, it means you cannot trust. You cannot trust it, or the you cannot trust it. You cannot trust the person. You cannot trust the area. You cannot trust the shop, for example. It's dodgy. So it's, to use it in a sentence, it's a rough area. It's a dodgy area. So that is how we can use it. Next one, number 3. Let's look at number 3. A lot of immigrants have settled there, so it's a lot more than it was in the past. Now, a lot more smart, probably not. A lot more filthy, well, that would sound racist if we're going to be totally honest. No, what we are probably looking at is multicultural. So if you have a lot more immigrants that have settled in your area, the word that we would probably be using here is multicultural. Multicultural. So if something's multicultural, it means you have lots of different cultures. Now, here we have a prefix, which is multi. Now, if you see multi on any word, multi means a lot. It is, we can add it at the start of the word. So some words have this prefix, multi, multicultural, multicultural. So that is one example. What's the opposite? Well, there's a lot of different ways of potentially describing a place that is not multicultural. If you want to be polite, I would say the opposite to some a place being multicultural is maybe describing a place as traditional, or yeah, I'd go with, if you want to be polite, traditional. We have to be a little bit careful here with the language, because when we talk about the anything to do with multicultural or the opposite to multicultural, this is very much in the area of political language. So we have to choose our words carefully. It's very easy to choose words that people might describe as not being polite. Some people might say your choice of words could easily come across politically incorrect, or at the same time, you're using a word incorrectly. It doesn't make sense in the context. So we have to be a little bit careful with our choice of words. But I would say, if you want to be polite, the opposite to multicultural would be traditional. A traditional area. It's easy to think of words that you might want to use if you don't want to be polite. It's also the same when we describe a place that is multicultural as well. So let's look at the next one, number 4. Used to be a fairly cheap working class place, but it's become a very residential area and very expensive. Dead? No. Isolated? No. This sounds like smart. Now, why would it be smart? Well, we've got some language here. It used to be fairly cheap, working class place. This is quite, this is a, can we use, hello, Isaac. Ezek, Ezek. Sorry, I know I've always found saying your name a little bit difficult, but you've asked me a question. Let's see what the question is. Can we use homogeneous when talking about culture? Let me think about that. I'm going to say in certain contexts we could potentially. I would say though you'd have to be quite careful. I would say make sure your context is already fairly specific, um, to make sure you use a word like homogeneous correctly. If I were to use an example, let me think. You're from Turkey, if I recall. So let's say you're talking about a very specific area um, in Turkey, and you want to explain that. Okay, think of actually, we don't just need to stick to Turkey. Anyone who's watching, think of your home country. Think of an area that it might be out in the countryside or very far away from your main cities. And you want to describe the place as everyone is of the same kind. They are alike. They think alike. Um, that is when you can use a word, the adjective homogeneous. So you could say, if I were to use an example in the UK, I want to say Halifax, but I might be wrong these days. I'll tell you what, growing up, there's a place in Yorkshire called Halifax, which I would say I grew up quite near to. And Halifax was a bit of a homogeneous place. The reason being is that the people who lived in Halifax, um, they wouldn't necessarily, their families had been there for a long time. You would have people growing up and staying in the same place. They wouldn't necessarily, you had a lot of people who didn't necessarily travel outside the area for very long, wouldn't go outside for very long. Their parents were there, their grandparents were there, their great grandparents were there. And as a result, everyone in the community were very similar. They thought very much alike. And in that case, you can say a homogeneous place. But I would say we can probably add a little bit more language to it. Now, if you want to be, I'm going to give you two options here, a positive and a negative way of using this word, just to make sure you can use this word properly. So if you want to use it in a positive way, we can say the place is traditional. Is traditional and has a charming, homogeneous feel to it. Now, this is if you want to say that, for instance, this is a positive way because we're using the word charming. Here, you're going to say that people are quite traditional in their way of thinking. My example would be when I went to Peru, for example. It was rather a homogeneous place. Some areas outside a place called Cusco in the countryside, where the community were very similar, from little villages to little villages, areas to areas. They're right outside in the countryside. Generations upon generations would have been there, and there was a charming feel to the place because you were seeing old culture. So that is one way of how you could use the word homogeneous, a charming, homogeneous feel to it. That is if you want to use it positively. If you want to use it in a negative way, you could say the people from the area are rather homogeneous, and as a result, they can be close. You could go with close-minded, or they can be. Yeah, you okay? So you could go with close-minded. That would be one option. Close-minded means effectively that they're so traditional in their way of thinking that new ideas, they don't like new ideas. So that is how you could use the word homogeneous in when we're talking about culture. Okay, well, we've gone off a little bit, but I wanted to answer your question. So I hope that answers your question. We were originally going to answer question. Yes, we're talking about for. Just to give you an idea, when we talk about a place of working class, we're in the UK, for example, we've got lower class, working class, middle class, upper middle class, and then upper class, for example. These are the different types of levels that you would have in your culture, in your society, and obviously positive would be smart. The opposite to smart, actually, this is a word that we've already used. Positive, smart, and the negative would be rough. So that is an alternative there. So you've got rough, which is the negative. Okay. Number 5, it's in the middle of nowhere. It's in the middle of nowhere. You basically need a car, or you'll be a bit connected. Well, definitely not connected. So a bit isolated. So number 5 here is isolated. Isolated. The number 5 is isolated. The opposite to isolated would be maybe central. Opposite to isolated. Okay. A synonym, okay, of isolated would be cut off. So you could actually replace this. You could say, instead of you basically need a car, or you'll be a bit cut off. So you've got isolated and you've got the synonym, which is cut off. Number 7, here you have, there's absolutely nothing to do around there, so it's pretty at night. Well, before we knew that you had lively when there's a lot to do. So when there's not a lot to do, we know already that the answer here is going to be dead. So number 7 is dead. Finally, number 8, it's better than it was thanks to the new tram line. Tram line is a form of travel, and therefore we know that this one here is going to be connected. Now, that's number 8. Connected. I think we might have missed one. Yes, I've missed out 6. Sorry, I missed out 6. The streets are something. They covered it in. They are covered in litter, and there's graffiti everywhere. Well, this quite simply is the opposite to clean, which is, in this case, not just dirty, but if something's really dirty, we would say filthy. It's filthy. Obviously, the positive would be clean. The opposite to filthy, more than just clean, I would say spotless. Spotless is the opposite to filthy. Spotless is the opposite to filthy. So, for example, if any of you have been to Singapore, the streets are spotless. If any of you have been to, where's a really dirty place that I can think of? Okay, I haven't been to Naples yet, but I have heard from some people who have been to Naples that there are parts of Naples or Napoli which are filthy because of waste and rubbish left out. So that takes us all the way through to question 5. Now, for the next bit, we're going to look at some grammar, and we're going to look at comparing now and the past. Now and the past. And this is something I invite you guys to do. In the comment section, please let me know please let me know about comparing the past to the present with regards to your rooms or your houses or your area. So here we've got this. We often make comparisons between situations and things as they are now and as they were in the past. There are a lot more bars. So, for example, there are a lot more bars and restaurants than there used to be. So here we've got a statement: a lot more bars, a lot less bars, a lot more shops, a lot less shops. So you've got this a lot more and a lot less options going on. And then you've got to finish the sentence with "than there used to be," or "than restaurants than I remember." So we've got a few ways of doing this. I'm going to build on this rather than just going by what the book says over here, because the book is a bit limited, if you ask me. Although it will help you to answer questions number 8. But just to give you some ideas, you've got, first of all, we've got to use these quantifiers. So quantifiers you can use: a lot more, a lot less. We can use fewer, which is another way of saying less. More something. So you could go with more beautiful, more popular, more people. If you don't go for more, you can go for the shorter adjectives of comparison, such as busier, richer, aura. We have to use the comparison in that way. And then you've got much. So much, much better, much worse, or sometimes uh, much busier, for example. Then you've got this not as. So you've got not as fit, not as healthy, not as good, for example. So let's look at some examples here. We've got number 8. And in number 8, we have look at these sentences from the conversation. Now, I will build on these. So you've got look at these sentences from the conversation, then work in pairs and answer the question. There are fewer cars on the road than before. There's much less crime now. It's more popular than it used to be. I'm much thinner than I was. It was so much worse in the past. I'm not as fit as I used to be. So, which sentences use nouns in the comparison, which use adjectives? Let's have a little look. There are fewer cars on the road than before. Well, we know it's using an adjective here in its comparison with few and fewer. There's much less crime now. Here we can see that you've got the you've got much less going on, less, more, but here we've got crime. So here we can see that it's using it's including the noun as part of its comparison here. It's more popular than it used to be. This is definitely 100% using the adjectives. I'm much thinner than I was. Again, this is going on just using the adjective. It's much worse than in the past. Here we've got the adjective, but then it's adding a noun at the end. And I'm not as fit as I used to be. Here we're just using the adjective. When do you use fewer to compare, and when do you use less? This is a good one to think about. There are fewer cars on the road than before. There's much less crime now. Well, again, this is to do with whether you're going to use the verb to be or much. If you use much, then you have to use less. And the same goes for, well, actually, not necessarily. It depends how much you want to emphasize. So if you say there are fewer cars, and then you want to say there there are much. Okay. There's much less crime. The difference is how much. Much less is greater than fewer. Now, if I say there are less cars on the road, that is the same as saying there are fewer cars on the road. They have the same meaning. But if I want to emphasize that there is a really big difference, that's when I'm going to use much. There's much less of something. There's much less of something. There's much fewer. No, that's not something we're and use. So if you want to emphasize that there's a big difference, you go for much less or much more instead of fewer or greater. And this goes with that actually. Let's look at the opposites here. So in a positive way, you would say much more is bigger than saying something is just there's a greater amount of something. So there's a greater amount of people. There are much more people. Oh, sorry, there are many more people. There are much more. There are much more people. There are many more people. Many more people, actually. Let's choose a different thing because I want to use much. There are much. There are much more. There's much more water. There is much more water. Okay, so in the middle, you've got fewer, much less, fewer, much less, greater, much more, greater, much more. So I'm going to write this just in order from bottom to the top. So you've got much less, you've got fewer, you've got greater, and then at the top you've got much more. So that is the scale of it. What time words and phrases are used to refer to the past? Well, quite simply, we've got than in number one, we've got than before. In number two, you've got used to be. In number, sorry, not number one, A. Sorry, I should be doing A. I should be doing B. In C, we've got was. D, you've got the past. Okay. Due to the actually, let me just clarify with D than I was. That is talking about the past. Next one, 4. What usually comes first in the sentence? The situation now or the situation in the past? So there are fewer cars on the road than before. We can see in this example the situation now. B, there's much less crime now. The present. Oh, sorry. In the previous one, I just realized used to be, not B, that was C. C and F. That was used to be. Sorry, my mistake. So it's more popular than it used to be. We can see the situation is now. It was much worse in the past. It was much worse in the past. Well, E is just talking about the past, but it's still referring to something in the present. F, I'm not as fit as I used to be. So the answer here is what usually comes first in the sentence, the situation now or the situation in the past? It is now. So for number 4, usually we put the situation now first. Number 5, what do you remember about the rules for comparative adjectives for number 6? We didn't look at number 6, so we can't answer that question. So let's try and think of some examples here that we can use for ourselves. Please write your examples in the live chat. I will give you my personal examples. I need some water. So, for instance, if I talk about myself, for example, um, okay, if I think about myself, I would say I am I fitter now than I used to be? In one sense, yes. Um, I think in terms of physical strength, I am stronger than I used to be. I am stronger than I used to be. In terms of my shoulders, because I have problems with my shoulders, I would say my shoulders are much better than they used to be. They are much better than they used to be. If I talk about problems in the world, I would say there are greater problems in the world in 2020 than there were in 2014, for example. I could say that. If I were to talk about phones, for example, phones are always a good one to compare. This phone, this is a Samsung. I can't remember the type of phone, the type of Samsung. Does it tell me what type of phone it is? No. Anyway, this is a new Samsung. The phone I had before was a Huawei. This is much better. Um, it was it was less expensive um, because of the deal I had, but this is a much better phone than the Huawei that I had before. I think the camera is better. I have fewer problems with this phone than with my Huawei, and I think the battery is it lasts longer than the Huawei. You will notice that I'm using than at the end to compare. Is this the best phone I've ever had? In terms of its ability, probably. Um, but if I think back to my old Nokia phone, so I'm going back a long time here. I think I'm going back to the when would it be? Late 90s, early 2000s, maybe. I can't remember. It's when like the Nokia had like Snake, the game Snake on it. I would say phones today are weaker, in fact, much weaker than the old Nokias, than the phones used to be. I remember the Nokia used to be really strong, the one that you could play Snake on. I can't remember the name of the phones now, but you could drop it from a very high uh, point and the phone wouldn't break. You could continue using it. It did what you wanted a phone to do. You could call and text, and that was about, and play Snake. That was about it. Today, your phone is more than just a phone. It's your alarm clock. It's your camera. It's your video recorder. It's your bank, your wallet. It's so many. It's so many things today than what it used to be. Um, I would say talking about technology in general. Actually, I would say technology today, yes, it's more advanced. It's much more advanced, but should we? But it's not. But I think the computers today, they don't last as long as they used to. Hi, Eski. So, should we use the other way around? Should we always use simple tenses for comparing now and the past? Really good question. The answer is no. You can use more complicated sentences and tenses for that matter. Um, Okay, here's an example. We can use conditionals and we can talk about hypothetical situations of something being better or worse. So, for example, if we don't stay, uh, if we don't isolate ourselves, we could make the current situation much worse than it already is. So if we don't isolate ourselves, we could make the current situation much worse than it already is. So that is an example of how we can use it in a conditional form. Um, can I think of another example of using it in a complicated way? Um, yes, let's go with a passive. The virus can be, uh, let's say, the virus being virus is being spread. Okay, the virus is being spread faster than past um, than past uh, outbreaks because modern because modern modern day travel is far better than it used to be. Okay, so I'll just read this out for you. This is how you can use it when in a passive. It's quite difficult. You have to think about it. So you can say, if I'm going to use the virus as an example because it's easy to use here. The virus is being spread faster than past outbreaks because modern day travel is far better than it used to be. I'll say that again slowly. Write this down. The virus is being spread faster than past outbreaks because modern day travel is far better than it used to be. So that is one example. In case you're not sure what I mean by an outbreak is a medical is when there's a medical problem of a virus. So if there's an outbreak of a virus, when a new virus comes and spreads quickly, that is called an outbreak. So the coronavirus, we can say the outbreak of coronavirus has covered the world. So that is how we can use it. So that takes us pretty much to the end. What I'd like you guys to do in your own time, have a look at number 10 here. We need to match questions number 1 to 6 with the replies of A to F. We've got these phrases in bold. Would it be okay if I have friends to visit? Would you mind if I cooked for myself? Do I have to be home before a certain time? Can I use the washing machine? Would it be possible to move a table into my room? Is it okay if I play music? These words in these phrases in bold, these are permission request. These are phrases to ask permission. They're very polite, and you then can look at the response. So, for example, if we look at A, not at all, as long as you're quiet if you're back late. This would go with do number 3. So 3 goes with A, Do I have to be home before a certain time? Number A, not at all, as long as you're quiet if you're back late. Here, when you use these in number A, B, C, D, E, and F, these are these are polite responses to questions. Um, so not at all, as long as you're quiet. So this is a nice way to respond to these polite requests. Have a look. What I might do, if I remember correctly, next week I will just go over this homework, actually number 10, with some of the answers. So thank you. Actually, I'll tell you what. I will dedicate the first 10 minutes of next week, the first lesson next week, to just finishing off developing conversations at the end of this unit. And then we can start on the next unit, which would be number 10. If you have any questions, please ask in the comment section below. LVScom, thanks, Richard, for this lesson. Have a good day. Thank you very much. Have a good day as well, everyone. Thank you very much, and I will see you next week. I will be posting later on today on our Facebook page the times of the different lessons that we're going to have online next week. Okay, so thank you very much, guys, and look out for the post later today on Facebook about the times for next week. Stay safe. Hope you're all well. See you next time. By the way, later on today, I am giving a lesson for upper intermediates and IELTS students. I do invite you guys, if you do want to have a look at that lesson, please join. You are welcome to join. This is YouTube. It's not like a normal class. So there might be something for you guys to learn, and some of you might find it difficult, but some of you who might be strong intermediates might be okay with the content in the lesson. So take care. Thank you very much. That's a point. It's also there for advanced students. So it's generally upper levels at 2 p.m. today. Thank you very much. Bye for now.